Hello. Excited for today's guest because she is part of our monthly Patreon Zoom, which is just, I look forward to it. And we got to meet you in New York. So this is really special. I've been wanting to hear your story. Please welcome Jessica from upstate New York. Hey,
Hi,
Jessica.
guys. Hi.
Welcome. Welcome.
Hello. I'm so excited to talk to you both. Yeah, it's really exciting.
We're excited to hear the full story.
I mean, I really know nothing. So,
Yeah.
It's
um,
funny, right, that we have been in each other's orbit for a bit now, and yeah, this will be the first time that we talk about it.
now have you
Yeah.
told your story elsewhere?
No.
We have
Oh,
a lot of first timers on the podcast. Like, well, Jane, who we were just talking about, was her first one, and then off
yes.
she went. It, broke her out of her shell, and she's been on a
Wow.
few since then.
Hi,
Yeah.
Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah.
Now I feel like it's a world premiere for the people who grew up in the same, remember the world premiere videos on MTV?
And so tell us your story from how you'd like to tell it, origin, beginning, or where would you like to jump in?
So yeah, I was born and raised in upstate New York,
Are you
and
a baby scooper like we are?
I am, yeah, a baby scooper. I was 1970,
Hmm.
and I was adopted to a family that had already had three sons biologically.
Oh,
Um, mhm. Yeah,
interesting.
my mother wanted a girl, and so she got really sick after my last brother was born, and she couldn't have any more children, and so they put into, I don't know if it was, I think it might have been Catholic Charities, and tried to a get a girl. And so about 4 years later, or 5 years, I never can remember the math, but got a call that there was a baby available, baby girl available. And so I was born in March. Then I went into foster care for a while, not too long, I think like 2 months, and then went to my family.
I think,
And
though, I will say I believe that that foster care too is just another trauma, right? Because you
Oh,
do
yes,
yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
this
I
attach,
actually,
probably not bond, but attach, and then you
right.
have to leave again.
Yeah. And I actually think I actually wrote to the state through like the FOIL, like Freedom of Information. And they sent back a letter saying, no, that just doesn't count.
That's it. It's insane. It doesn't count. Everything else does, but not that.
Right. Yeah. Freedom. What does that mean? Freedom,
Yeah,
right? So
Yeah.
nothing.
very interesting. But yeah, so I grew up in a very interesting area. It was a small city, industrial kind of city, and it's really a really tough city. We lived in a neighborhood that was not necessarily, I wouldn't say it was safe. I think it was a little bit more safe when my brothers were coming up. And then when I was coming up, it was pretty unsafe. And there was a lot of really tough situations that I witnessed or was a part of. And a lot of times I would think to myself, like, where the heck did I land? This is really
Did you know
crazy.
you were adopted? They told you at a young age?
No, so actually I didn't know I was adopted until I was probably, I think I was about 8 or 9.
Oh, that's
I
late.
It is late. And one of the things that I noticed when I listen to podcasts, your podcast, and listen to the stories of other adoptees, and when they talk about finding out, I haven't heard many people say the intense, profound trauma that caused. I adored and loved my parents so much. I was just out on the street, like playing with my brothers or whatever. I was always just out there with my older brothers, and they were teenagers and getting themselves into mischief. And there was like, gangs of them that walk around, and my mother always tasked them to watch me, right? And so I was being teased by a group of them, and I remember my brothers saying, yelling at the kids to stop. And I went and sat on the porch at home, and somehow my folks came out and asked me what was wrong, and I said they were teasing me about being adopted. And my mother, kind of in a huff, said, "Well, you are."
Mm.
I think that was something that she would have taken to her grave. Um, Obviously, that probably wouldn't have worked out, but And, it was really, really, really painful. I think that was a pain that I can conjure up at any moment. Like it was
It's
almost like,
yeah, it's like a betrayal or something because it's very late. I don't remember being told, but I'm glad I knew because I
yeah,
was teased also by my brother's friend, but I knew. So I had that in place. Like not
yeah,
to know would be,
it
wait,
was awful. It was
yeah,
awful. I mean,
Yeah. So
the
what,
only
what,
thing I could think of was how I just wanted my mother to be my mother. I
mm,
just wanted my father to be my father. And it was excruciating. And they
did she
weren't.
expound on it at all, or just kind of like, yep, you were, and then no more conversation about it? Or
Yeah, there was, I'm a very visual person. I'm an artist. And I taught art for a long time. And there's this vision of this chair. She was working on this like unfinished chair, this rocking chair. She was painting it. She was like OG, like DIY. She was always doing something. She was amazing at it. And she was just working on this chair. And she continued to work on the chair while
mm,
I laid in her bed. And I think my dad came in and checked on me, and I was just ripped apart. Like it was almost like somebody told me they died.
yeah,
Right. That's kind of mourning and grief and the pain. So I think the only thing she wasn't equipped to talk to me about it, right? She couldn't, she was very abused as a kid. She wasn't ready for that. So they brought me to the store. She had to get more paint. So she brought me to the store and they bought me this big pencil. So like I have these visions of the chair, right? And the pencil from this terrible, horrible, painful moment. And then really there just wasn't any more talk about it. Um, my father just passed away last May. It'll be a year. And my brothers said, "What are you going to do with the chair?" And so I took it out back and I burned it.
oh,
And
Mm.
and
that's
it was more
symbolic.
right. And it wasn't because I was angry. I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't doing it. I know that sounds like it's such a horrible thing to do, but
No,
I was kind of like letting it go and letting it go for her, for my mom too. It was kind of like, let's just let this moment she wasn't ready for it. It wasn't right. It was painful. And so my brothers and I we have a horrible sense of humor. So we kind of laughed, like, yeah, burn it, burn the chair. So that's what we did. So then I kind of went on with my life, didn't talk about it, but like with my family, I didn't talk about it. With my friends, with people, whoever wanted to listen, I kind of became really, I've heard other people say this, like, yeah, I'm cool, right? Because I'm
right.
adopted. Like I've got this specialness about me. And that was okay. And I was always sneaking around, like trying to find information or sort of daydreaming about who my mother would be, like we all do, right? Um,
Hmm.
when I was walking downtown with my friends, I was just so cool that I was like, I'm going to stop in this office. And I slid into this lawyer's office. That was the lawyer that handled my adoption. And the reason I knew that was because it was like right down the street from us. It wasn't far from where we lived. And my neighbor worked for that attorney. So as I'm walking downtown, like we would go down and have lunch at Woolworth and go to Strawberries Records and Tapes and just hang out. I jumped in there and I was like, I need somebody to help me find my mother. Like it
Were
was
you a
so,
teenager at this point?
I was probably about 13.
Oh,
And I just was so impulsive that way. Like I was just
yeah.
like, I'm just do this thing. And I did. I never told my mother. I'm sure that the attorney told my neighbor who was the secretary there. She wasn't there the day I went in. And
Was
it's
he,
just
was,
Do they
was it,
help you?
that's what I was just going to,
it was a
Is
she,
she?
and she had adopted children, and I got this
right.
sort of like scripted answer. Well, I'd be more than happy to help you when you get big and you have your own family, and if you still want to. I was like,
Oh,
whatever,
please.
When you
right?
get big.
It was like,
And not until you have your own family.
Right.
yeah.
Mm,
And what does that look like? How do you
right.
know? what's gonna, right? So it's just very interesting. So yeah, so that was kind of my life, right? Just being sneaky about it, looking in my mother's dresser drawers when she wasn't
Mhm.
around, and there's a box um, in their closet that had some adoption papers. I read those and I tried to talk to them about it. And sometimes my mother would be pretty relaxed about it, but there wasn't a lot. It just said like he liked to fish, he liked cars, he was Italian. My mother, not much about her.
Oh,
And
more about the father.
Interesting.
it's interesting. It is interesting because I think, as I know now, she was just so young. And he was a lot older. So there was and she was reporting it, right? So I just envision this young woman being like so enamored with him and writing out like who she wanted me to, know, or wanted to report, I should say, right?
Like the
So,
father is this, the father is that, and
right,
not
right.
even taking her self-importance into account. Yeah.
That's how I look at it now, knowing what I know. So life was a mess. I got married to somebody who I was with since middle school. I just really kind of pushed that relationship because I was so attached to him and just really wanted to be married and, wanting that stability and happily ever after. And that lasted a hot second before I, decided I was going to go into this other relationship. And I got married to him, and we have my two older boys. And that was such a volatile, no, I don't know if volatile is the right word, but it was just like this. I don't know if, I guess like in Al-Anon and AA, they say you should never marry your soulmate, right? Because it's just too intense, right? There's just so much intensity. Like, and that relationship was very intense. He had alcohol problems, and it was madly in love, right? But he was never someone I could trust that I knew what he was up to.
Mhm.
And we had a lot of fun, and it was just really like this wild relationship. And, he went on to become a prosecutor for the Department of Justice in DC. We lived in DC when the boys were born. Worked for narcotics and dangerous drugs, which was the worst job he could have gotten. And he wound up, you know, stealing from the evidence
I
rooms
was gonna
and
say using.
taking drugs and
Mm.
stealing in the money. And I never knew where he was because he traveled a
Oh
lot
God.
for his job. He was out of the country or in another city, and was getting into a lot of problems that I didn't even know about. And I was home with the two boys in DC, and he wound up actually. I saw the writing on the wall, and I needed to get home. I needed to get back to where my folks were so that I could have some support, because I couldn't imagine trying to stay in DC with such issues. So like life just was like such, now that I know what adoptees go through and like what, coming out of the fog, so to speak,
Mhm.
there's no mystery why I was in that relationship.
No.
Right.
And
So, and
he,
did all the drama, like a twofold question,
yeah,
did the birth of your children, like we hear from many people,
Mhm.
spur any interest of your own, of like, oh, maybe I should find my roots? And then, or B, did the drama of what was going on kind of put all that on the back burner?
it did. It put it on the back burner just because I was in survival mode. I mean,
Yeah.
we moved back up here to upstate. He wound up a heroin addict, robbing banks and
Oh, wow.
local
Wow.
stores, and he was in prison for a long time, and we lost everything. So I was in survival mode. I mean, I lost
Yeah.
like 20
Were
pounds. I
you
was
still in
80
your
pounds.
20s at this point?
I was in my 30s, actually,
Mhm.
my early 30s. I, we lost everything. I had to move in with the boys who were babies. I had to move into my folks' house. My
Yeah.
mother wasn't, again, equipped for that. it was very hard for her to be, watch this happening to us and having us in the house. And we laughed because my mom had all these little knickknacks that were like fake muffins and fake coffee cups. And the kids were always like trying to eat the muffins, and that it was just, so I found this little,
Chaos.
chaos. It was just like, literally I had no car, I had no money. He put all of our money in his, in an intravenous, needle, and was a heroin addict. And
God, I'm
so
sorry. That's
it was
big.
great. It was awful.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Is he okay now? Not that this is his story, just curious.
I don't really know. I don't think so.
Mm.
I really tried to have the kids, after he got out of prison. I tried to keep the kids connected to him as much as we could, but it was very touch and go when he would show up. So it just petered off after a while. And, being adopted and going down these avenues of learning
Ooh.
about our family, I've been trying to really just be super conscious of that with them, right? Because my
Yeah.
husband has been their father since they were 4 and 6. So I really don't want them to lose the idea that, they should have access to him, whatever that means to them. And I would
Mhm.
be there for them with that, just knowing what I know, what I've been dealing with. So anyhow, it wasn't until I kind of stabilized my life again. I finished up my teaching degree, started teaching art. I finished up my master's degree while the boys were little. There was a lot of daycare, a lot of babysitting. It was very tough on us. It was a long stretch. And I've got to work with them on all of the trauma they had, right?
Yeah.
So I do my best, and they're adults now, they're in their 20s. And then my husband and I had a third child, and he's 15 now. So once I really kind of did the work of getting myself back on track so I could, afford to raise my family and meet somebody stable and that kind of thing. Once life started to stabilize a little bit, I got back on the journey. So in 2020, I really wanted to do a couple things. I had this mourning for the loss of my potential, and
Mm.
it was very deep. And I really wanted to do a few things. One was I wanted to open my business, and the other thing was to, find my biological mother. And I had a DNA kit lying around forever, and I really just didn't want to spit in it because I'm thinking I'm just going to get a ton of people, and I'm not going to get what I want, right? So that same year in 2020, New York State opened up the adoption
Right.
birth, or the original birth certificate. So that's what happened. Is I got my original birth certificate. It was crazy taking that step to even open up the envelope. My UPS guy is a neighbor, and so he texted. He was supposed to have it signed,
Right.
and he's like, "I'll just leave it." He's a friend of ours. Just leave it on your, in your breezeway, and I'll text your husband and let you know when it's there. And so it is interesting too. I would love to talk to UPS drivers, because he said to me that he had stood in front of a woman when she opened hers.
Oh,
Mm.
Can you imagine?
no.
Right. And he asked me, he said, "What is this document? May I ask what, because there's a lot of documents that I've been delivering lately." And I said, "Well, it's actually,
In 2020,
Oh,
like when
yeah, because
that
I'm
just hit
telling
me
you
for some
what,
reason.
yes,
yeah.
it's really profound. It's really,
Think of that. I've never thought of that.
right?
Everybody at once
Mm.
getting theirs.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
I think that a lot of people were probably feeling the same way I was when it
Yeah.
opened up. It could very quickly change, right? This could be a can of worms that the state was like, "Oh God, we shouldn't have done this," and then somebody in the legislature could have very easily changed this. So I think a lot of us just jumped on it and did it. So he said he'd been delivering so many, documents to people. And so I told him the story. So I drove around with the envelope for the whole day. my son was little at the time. He was in 5th grade and a little bit impulsive. And I thought, I have so many errands to run with him. And I don't want him to snatch it out of my hand and be like, let me, so I just put it in my bag and I drove around doing everything. And I think we were talking about this on the Zoom the other day. I literally was taking pictures of the envelope wherever we went and sending them to my husband like it was Flat Stanley.
Yeah,
Like,
Flat Stanley.
like, look at me and grandma having a margarita, like, so I got home that night and I was by myself. My husband was on a ski trip and the kids were all in bed, and I opened up the envelope and I just pulled it out one line at a time because it was one of those flat cardboard envelopes. And I just pulled it out one line at a time and I just would breathe. And I mean, it was so intense. And one of the first things I saw was that I had a name. It was Jessica Hope. And
Jessica Hope.
And I lost it. Like I couldn't.
That's lovely too.
It was lovely. I never really imagined having a name that was obviously chosen for a beautiful reason.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was very lovely. And so I lost one of my older sons walked in the room to see what was going on. And he was trying to help me decipher the last name that I had and my mother's last name, because it was something I'd never seen before. I couldn't really figure out even what the nationality was. And just going back about a month or so, I was kind of doing this countdown to 50. And so I was journaling, doing a visual journal. So I was drawing pictures in this visual journal of this journey to 50. And then, this was a part of it. So I was drawing pictures of all of these experiences, like opening up this thing and the name and, just visually putting into my journal the things that would hit me, right? So one of the things that was very hard was looking at the father. You get the mother's thing, and it says, what was odd is they said she was like 27, which wound up not being the case.
Because you know that she was very young. You said so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually didn't really know until after the birth certificate how young she was. I thought, okay, well, she was 27. That's odd. It doesn't make sense based on some of the other stuff that I saw. And then you get down to the father information and it's blank. And that was a really fun journal entry for me because I really, I drew some very vulgar things in my journal. And they were both, because he wasn't listed. She was from a town that was super close. And and it's funny because I just, how we do that thing where we fantasize about who we are and where we're from. And I was from this little town that I wouldn't really want to be from. So I was like, oh, this stinks. Like
I had that too, where I was like, that's not me. Yeah.
I want to be from some really cool place.
Yeah. Glamorous.
So, right? Glamorous. Yes. And I
already grew up in a factory town, and now to find out I'm from
exactly.
one.
Yes, exactly. And I have to say, like growing up too, and like I said, I was from this neighborhood in this city and my parents were not wealthy. That was a very interesting thing as far as like taking a child from a girl that was underprivileged, giving her to a family that was underprivileged, right? Like, and we talk about this privilege. So it was very interesting because growing up, I thought this can't be what she wanted for me, right? This couldn't possibly be like when, I've got men standing in my window on a bucket at night watching me through the window, or being chased through the cemetery or, being exposed, but like all this terrible stuff. And I just felt like, why is this my life? Like, why? Like, she couldn't have possibly wanted this for me. And is this what adoption is? Right? Like they say that you go off and have a better life, right? This narrative. And I'm like, and don't get me wrong, like I love my brothers and I really kind of took pride in this like crazy life we were growing up in. It was like an Outsiders movie, right? It was like
Right.
something from a book. I feel like I was a street kid and it was kind of cool, but like still, I love my parents. But it was so mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
How could that be better? And so anyhow, so fast forward, I didn't think I didn't think that I would try to look for her, but you know how that is. Social media, it took me no time to just
Yeah.
put
Put the
in her
name in.
name. And it was very specific, her name, like very specific in the town. Like there couldn't have been another person in that town with that name. And in fact, so I found her quickly. And about a day later, I messaged her on, which is very funny. I messaged her on Instagram, and she had to be at that point in her 70s. And
She had an
got
Instagram?
right, right. And she got back to me within about an hour or so.
Oh.
And it was very sterile, very walls up.
Mm.
I started by saying, "Hi, this is Jessica Hope. Thank you for this beautiful name. I hope that your life has been well." You know, the whole thing, like, I'm not here to upset your life, you know. And
Yeah,
she,
the disclaimer that we always have to
Yeah.
make. Yes.
right, because we're the ones that have to be sorry.
Yes.
So
Mm.
she conversed with me for about an hour. She would only answer questions. She would not ask me anything about myself.
Mm.
And it was very hard because I kept looking at this conversation as it was going on, is that I cared far more for her than she cared for me. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
I even asked her if she was safe during her pregnancy, because I thought, well, what if she was like a victim of some sort of abuse, or was she supported it? She said her mother died right before, about a year before I was born. Her mother died. So she didn't have anyone. She had no siblings. She
Mm.
never told her father. She
Oh.
told no one about me except my father, who she refused to tell me
How
who
did
he
she
was.
hide it?
That's what I asked her. She said just the fashion of the
Yeah.
time. And then reading I Would Meet You Anywhere,
Yeah.
I thought, okay, maybe she did the same, right, as Yumi,
Yeah.
as maybe she tried not to gain that much weight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my birth mother gained 7 pounds and never had a prenatal. I honestly think she didn't know she was pregnant, but 7 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you
Wow.
wear
I
a
mean,
big
I've gained more than
sweater
that in the last year. I mean,
I had a piece of chocolate cake yesterday.
gained 10 pounds. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
she wasn't willing to tell you. Did she tell
no.
you the circumstances or the relationship or?
anything.
So she told me that that my father was a much older man. I asked her if she was 27 when she had me, because that's when it was on the birth certificate. She said, no, I was 19.
Mm.
She said he was 40.
Mm.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was very angry, obviously, at this person, especially because I knew her mother had died.
Yeah, it's like what a yeah. Mm-hmm.
This vulnerable young woman.
Vulnerable. Yeah.
So she, like I said, she wouldn't ask. So I finally said, do you want to know anything about me? I was just so hurt. And leading up to it and telling my friends that I was going to do this, everybody was just showering me with love before I found out who she was and saying, she's going to be so
Right.
happy. It was you, Jessica, right? And it just, it was the opposite, right? It was the opposite. She didn't ask anything. There was no, how have you been? Were you healthy? Were you happy? It was very much her saying, just these very short answers.
Mhm.
So
Did you get the feeling that maybe she was, since the law changed in 2020, like that she was kind of expecting this day would arrive?
yes, absolutely. Because she went right to health information. Would you like to know anything about health? Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she did say he was married, and my father was married. And this went on, this conversation went on for about an hour, and it was all through Instagram messaging. And at the end of the message, she said, I'm going to go now. I'm going to be away for a while. I hope you understand that I'm going to delete all of these
Oh.
messages.
Was she now married? Like
Something.
At that point, she told me she had children and she'd never told her children about
Okay.
me.
She's also in her 70s. So you think, okay, if something happens to me, they'll read this.
Yes. Yes. She did say also that her husband had died when her children were young. So she had lost me. Well, she lost her mother. She lost me. She did express that she would never have wanted to give me up if circumstances were different. She lost my father, then she got married, had her own children, had her children. I can't believe how often I say that. Had her
Right.
own.
I know.
And then he died, and they were young, and so she was forced into this single motherhood.
Yeah.
So she had a lot of loss.
She did.
Right. And so that has been our relationship. And actually, I got to say, when she said that she was going to delete it, I literally typed out, "Oh, so now I'm the other woman," and I didn't say it.
Oh, you didn't send it
Because of course I go right to that comedic comfort, that comedic,
I know,
so,
same. Deflecting, humor deflect. Because I was just going to say the most shocking thing to me about this story is that you found a someone in her 70s on Instagram.
Yeah, right. I mean,
so this went on, this sort of dynamic of her being the one that was I was more concerned with. I would
where did it go on? What did it go on Instagram, or did you switch
it went
to
on
texting?
with Instagram. And I left her alone for about a year or so, and then
wow,
would revisit.
That took a lot of tenacity to do that, I guess.
Yeah. I think I really needed to process what I had been given.
Did she tell you how old your siblings were?
No, she didn't want to tell me a word about them. She did say they were boys, which was interesting because I grew up with 3 brothers. I have 3 sons, and she has 3 boys.
Wow.
You can't get a girl, right? I was like laughing.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no girl. I was the girl. So
did you look in the pictures on Instagram and see them?
I absorbed that like so much before, because I figured she was going to shut it all down. So I went on a social media tirade trying to absorb it all, and I got a good picture and timeline and ages and stuff like that, just because you're going to do that, right? As an adoptee.
Did she shut it down? Did she make it unavailable?
Yeah, she did. And so this went on for a few years. We've been kind of in this mode of me asking questions, her answering. Sometimes, on a very rare occasion, she's been open. One time, I think it was about a year ago, I asked her about my birth story. She said to me, on the day you were born, I went into labor, and your father wouldn't come with me. No one knew, no one else knew. So she said this was her quote, which gutted me. She said, I drove myself to the hospital in labor, and I drove myself home in tears. And
my.
She said that she stayed with me for almost 3 days in the hospital, and she was able to spend that time with me, which I just learned that about a year ago, which
me too. I just learned that recently too, that I
really
had 6 days. Yeah, 6 days. I never knew that.
Wow. Yeah. And that's such an important part. I feel like it's one of the most important pieces of information I think I've gotten. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But it just
100%.
made me feel like there was that love in those first moments,
I just think of her driving herself home.
Yeah.
There is a trauma there that is very deep.
I mean, you can't even drive yourself home after a colonoscopy. So the fact that
they let her.
Yeah.
Right. She said she got very little health care while she was pregnant with me. And So I think it was about, let me think about this. About 2 summers ago, I kept revisiting, would you tell me who my father was? And I think it was not last summer, but the summer before, I finally asked her. But at the same time, I had already put some DNA into 23andMe.
I was just wondering if if you'd gone down that road
She
yet.
wasn't going to tell me, so I figured
Right.
I'm going to, but at the same time, I was almost about to get my results back. I think, forget how the time frame went. She told me who he was.
Oh, she did. She came.
Yeah. And what she said was, I'm ready to tell you because he died 2 months ago.
Oh,
I was just going to say, because the
he's
guy was
gotta
like
be
in his
old.
90s at that point, right?
Right.
So
Exactly. She told me who he was. And she told me that I needed to use that information or take that information very seriously, sort of like be careful with that. That's, between you and me kind of thing. She didn't say that, but like that was the gist of it.
I mean,
So
sorry, it's your
yeah,
choice.
right. The DNA came out. I found a first cousin with the same last name, confirmed it. He reached out to me, the first cousin. The math wasn't very hard to figure out who my father was. So this cousin knew.
Yeah.
It's not very hard once you get into that kind of stuff. Like, what your family
Right.
structure, right?
Right.
So he said, I can contact, my cousin and let her know that you have, that you are out there. She's a loving person. They're good people.
This would be your sister.
My sister, right? So there's five half siblings on my biological father's side. I found her, we met last April. She lives in Syracuse and my son is he was in college in Syracuse. So I met her when I was out visiting him. It was very intense. It was a lot. I went back to the Airbnb and I had fever dreams the entire night. I was just and like it was really tough. She knew that her family wasn't going to take it well. And so that was kind of a process. She told them about me and Easter. She told her siblings about me and Easter. They're kind of all over.
Was she the oldest, Cindy?
She is the youngest, and she's 9 months older than I am.
Okay.
So that was like.
So he had a wife who had a baby, then gets your mother.
Did all of your half siblings have the same mother?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I know, they had a really wonderful mother. She put up with a lot of garbage from him. He was very well known in the community, larger than life, Italian, everybody loved him. Everybody knew him. The name meant a lot at that time. The last name meant a lot at the time to, the community. And so she wound up telling the kids, her siblings that are all older than her, they took it on all different, from what she said, they handled it in all different ways, but weren't angry, like with me, right? They're more angry at the fact that, dad's gone and there's no way to reconcile this with him. And they're angry at him for doing this to the mom and angry for doing this to me. Like, I guess one of the siblings said, she's our sister. And how could he have done this to her? How could he? Which was very kind.
Yeah.
I was glad to hear that. I've not met any of them.
And you haven't?
No. It's a little odd to me. I feel like there might be a little bit of gatekeeping because I'm in contact with the one sister, and she's so happy to have me in her life and just really, really open to this. And she's, I think in her own way has reconciled it and forgiven her father, posthumously. Right. So I don't know. It's interesting. I get the sense that because she has this relationship with me, they're just like sort of checking off the box that they don't have to do the hard thing.
Right. I was going to say, yeah. Maybe so you need to reach out to them.
I think so. I did reach out to one I think he's in Colorado, because he expressed that he wouldn't mind having, an email exchange. And so my sister told me that. And so I did. And we had one email and my response to him was never replied to. So, I think that they had a lot to deal with him growing up. I think he was a piece of work, obviously.
Yeah.
I
Is,
never
is their
told,
mother still alive?
she died actually quite a while ago. She
Oh.
was maybe in the 80s or 90s. She
Oh,
died.
wow.
Yeah. So I think that they decide, or my sister decided to really kind of push them to let their children know. So it would be my nieces and nephews, to let them know, because sometimes when she comes to town, we go out to dinner and a
Oh,
lot of them are in the area.
they'd see you. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
small.
right. And when they know she's in the area, they'll say, "Hey, can we get out? We get together." And it's, if I'm out with her, she's like, "What am I going to say? I'm not going to tell them the truth if they run into us at a restaurant, or if they want to come out and have a drink with me, and she's here with me." All right. So at Christmas time, they all agreed that they would tell all the kids. And so it's kind of out of the bag now, right? That on my father's side. So on my mother's side, it's still a complete secret. On 23andMe, there was also an uncle percentage DNA that I couldn't track. And so one night I stayed up all night long to try to figure out who he was. Because I said to my husband, I said, I guarantee it's on my mother's side, and he was put up for adoption. And lo and
Mm.
behold, my mother, my biological mother, had a brother 2 years older than her that was put up for adoption by her mother.
Oh.
He and I are in
Wow.
reunion, and it's wonderful
Oh,
because,
it is.
So this
yeah,
is your
my
your
uncle.
birth mother's brother.
Did she
Has he
know?
reached
Yeah.
out to her?
So he reached out to her about 10 or 15 years ago. And I think about 10 years ago, they met one time. He
Oh.
asked her, really pushed her to do DNA, because he wanted to make sure this was right. So she did. She's not public on her DNA. They met. When he reached out to me on DNA on the platform, he didn't understand how we could have been related, but I had already figured it out. And so I asked him if I could call him on the telephone. And so I called him, and he's like in his late 70s. And it was very hard for him to wrap his brain around what I was saying to him. Said, I am the adopted daughter of right? I was put up for adoption by your biological sister. I probably had to say this to him like 3 or 4 times, because he just couldn't wrap his head around it.
Yeah.
Because he had met her, he knew that she had children. I was not a part of that, that tree. So he and
So when
I met.
she met him, she didn't tell him, "Oh, you're an adoptee, and I've given up a child." None of that.
She ghosted him for the last 10 years.
Oh.
He says he has such a soft spot in his heart for her. He's so kind. He's so sweet. And we've developed a relationship. I just met one of his daughters last week. We had dinner, and we're having dinner all together as a family next week. He's so happy to have me, and I'm so happy to have him. His family says that he lights up whenever I text him, and he's so wonderful. And he says he texts her, he emails her every year on her birthday, which is next week, and she never responds.
Yeah.
So over the summer, he and I were going to meet for the first time, and I convinced her to come, my mother,
So
and she
this
did. She
upcoming,
showed up.
last summer?
She came.
So it was the first time you met her face to face as well.
Oh my.
It was wild.
Wow.
It was
She
wild. I
just
didn't think
sounds
she'd
super
come.
shut down, right? Like it
Yeah,
was
shut
probably
down.
so painful for her, all the stuff she went through.
Yeah. Yep. So when he showed up with his wife to meet me, I said, I want you to know that your sister's going to come. And I thought his wife was going to fall over, because he came home from that meeting saying she doesn't want to continue any sort of relationship. So, and it was very painful for him, because he had grown up an only child and just longed to have some sort of understanding, family. And his wife has this big Italian family, and he just wanted that
Connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we met. It was a really nice meeting. It was a lot of fun. It was very interesting how much our sense of humor is all matched. And so he left with his wife, and she and I talked for a few minutes, and she said, I don't want any pictures and I can't have this. I loved meeting you, but I'm just going to go and be in my bubble, and literally uses the word bubble, keep
She
my
did.
family. And so I said, well, why don't we just at least look at each other in the mirror? Because it's a beautiful mirror I have in the shop, because she met us at the shop. And so I stood in that mirror with her, and I couldn't hold the gaze. It was
Oh,
so hard. I couldn't believe I was standing next to this woman who resembles me. And all I could think of was, in an alternate universe, I would have walked beside this beautiful human being, and everyone would have known we were mother and daughter. You could just take one look and know. And I literally just had to walk away from the mirror, like within probably 10 seconds. I couldn't do it.
yeah.
And so she left and, made it clear that she was going to kind of go back, like I said, to her bubble. I took some time off from contacting her after that. It took about a month and a half or so.
Mhm.
And every word that she chooses in her responses to me on the Instagram messaging is always, her words are very well chosen, very specific, everything. Grammar is always perfect. And I thought when she walked away from that meeting, she really has put herself out to the world, that she's really put together.
Yeah.
She was a business owner. She was very well known in her community, and she's put together, and this would probably
Burst
bring,
it.
yeah.
And I don't think it would in a weird, I mean,
Well, of course not.
but in her
It's a different
mind.
times, but she's,
Yeah.
I think, I wonder if there isn't some truth to, I've heard
Mm.
this before, that, that the birth mother kind of always stays at that age in
At
which
that
she
age.
relinquished the child, and
Yes.
so
Right.
the
Because I
era,
always
right?
thought to myself, well, she's keeping the secret for other reasons. But then I'm like, okay, not only for those reasons that she's saying, but it's also for the world's perception of what she, right? What she
That's
thinks.
right.
Mhm.
Of course.
So when I messaged her back about 6 weeks later after meeting her, oh no, I'm sorry. I messaged her right away the next day, and then I took a break. And she said, I was so glad to meet you. It was way more comfortable and nice than I thought it would be. But then I took the break. And then I texted her back, and she said she had a stroke.
Oh.
Oh,
I'm going to plug in a minute. Hold on one second. I'm going to plug my computer in.
must.
Okay. So I messaged her. She said, I had stroke. And that's how she said it.
I had stroke.
And this is the
Mm,
person who chose every word. so
right.
perfectly. And so I asked her when she had the stroke, and it was just a couple weeks after the meeting.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, but I could not really get past the amount of pain and trauma and secrets that she's been holding on to. And then having a stroke, like, it was just awful. So I was checking up on her a lot. She didn't really appreciate me checking up on her, and wanted to just act like everything was normal with her. She said her and her friends don't really talk about the stroke, like, just want to have a normal life.
Mm.
So I dialed it back and kind of went back into that mode of just talking to her whenever, and just kind of asking her questions when I came up with questions that I wanted to know the answers to. So one of the questions I asked her was, how would you have possibly known him, right? Like, how would you have known this man?
I was wondering that. Did they work together or what happened?
Right. Well, he was a teacher, and I thought for the longest time maybe they went, maybe she knew him from that, but she didn't go to his school. And she said, well, I was the babysitter.
Oh,
A babysitter, vulnerable,
Ooh.
lost her mother, gross.
Yeah. Right. And
Mm.
I have a feeling that maybe my paternal siblings might know that, because I haven't revealed
Uh-huh.
who she is, because um, I asked them to honor that, because she's not ready to be in that space. And she's, she had a lot of fear, and she expressed the fear that she had as this young woman of this man and his friends not believing her and not being able to,
Mm-hmm.
keep me. And it was all about him. It was this very young, scared girl kind of up against this thing.
This makes a lot more sense
Yeah.
to her
So
reaction.
And she probably, clearly has
Yeah.
shame, that
Yeah.
buried shame. And
yeah.
so how's she doing now? And what is it, just still kind of continuing on these
Yeah.
sort of sporadic
Yeah.
Instagram messages, no willingness to
We've
introduce
had,
your siblings? Or, I mean, at
No.
some point you do have the right
you do.
to reach out to them,
Yeah. So interestingly enough, um, she did share with me a while back that she was far more Italian than she ever thought she was, and that she herself felt as though she was adopted. And I said, well, you can't be adopted if you and I and uncle are all genetically connected, but um but I have a feeling that your father's not your father, I said, because my DNA stuff that I've done, I can't track how her father's side, there's no one who is connected.
So she's probably
So,
raised by someone that wasn't her father.
right,
Mm-hmm.
which is another trauma.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got my ancestry results this past Monday.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know, I got two first half cousins,
Okay.
and I tracked them, they're sisters, and I tracked them, and I'm pretty sure that I found her father. And so I reached out to them, and no, I reached out to the one cousin, and she's like, this is wild to me. She's like, I didn't say too much other than I think we're related through a paternal
Right.
grandfather. And that's the only way I can figure that I'm related to these girls, is that we had the same grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, but so what you're telling me is that I might have an aunt or an uncle out there. And I said, yeah, I have a feeling that's the case. So
And I know who she is.
she's my
Mhm.
mother, right? I didn't say that, but
Right.
she and I are going to speak this week. And so, like, when you say, right, you have a right to know these things, it's only a matter of time where it all just kind of comes
Right.
together. Puzzle,
Exactly.
right?
I'm in a situation where I have a search angel that found my biological grandfather. He was a physicist up in Rochester.
No
And
way.
I found a cousin who, she's adopted, right? So she
Mm-hmm.
could be listening. So her mother is my aunt. Her adoptive mother is my aunt. But nobody wants to really deal with me, even though
Right.
it was.
Well, no, my father is the gatekeeper to my entire massively huge family. He's the oldest of 7 sons. They all have 3, 4 kids. He has 2. I have 2 half sisters. One
Wow.
3 months older than me, went to my rival high school.
Wow.
She may listen to this. I mean, I keep reaching out to him. I've been ghosted, that I'm in that situation. But your story is, yeah, it's making me think, and it's very emotional.
It is very emotional. And I've taken little bites at a time and just kind of gotten
Yeah.
stronger. My girlfriend laughed at me the other day when I said, oh yeah, I'm gonna message these cousins.
That's what
Now,
I do. And then I don't.
like
I
2
actually
years
do go
ago,
through with it.
yeah, 2 years
I'm
ago,
like, I'm
I
sorry, I'm
would
going
never
through
have
with it.
done it. I would have been like, oh my
Yeah,
God, right? And
Well,
now
this
I'm
is
just,
all really so new. Like
it
I
is
kind of
very
was
new.
shocked to hear that it wasn't till 2020 that
yeah,
you went a
Mhm.
long
A long way.
yes,
time. So it is
yeah,
really in infancy stages, right? I mean,
right. And I think
it's
you hit the nail on the head, is that I had so much to deal with.
You're doing a great job. You've been doing a lot.
It's wild. Well, you too, you guys, my gosh, I don't think there's anything that we can't handle, you know.
Right.
I lost my dad, my adoptive father, and he was really good about knowing that I was on my journey.
Mm-hmm.
My mother died in 2017. She would not have been.
No.
He wanted to meet my mother. She wouldn't have met him. But interestingly enough, the only time she ever reached out to me was when she saw on shop my shop Instagram account that my father had passed, because he was sort of a fixture at the shop, and she saw
Mhm.
that on Instagram, and so she reached out to apologize for seeing that he had passed, and then she just sent me a flurry of pictures of her growing up, and she'd never contacted me before. I've always contacted her. She's never shared any pictures or anything.
Oh,
So she sent me this,
that
you know,
helped. That did something for her.
Well, this
did.
sounds like there's definitely, opportunity, more to come. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's early stages. She's got to process
A lot.
around her own shame. Not that,
I
it's
know.
unfortunate that we have to make all the twist ourselves to everybody else's wants and
Right.
needs, but
Right. She was very surprised that on, the times that I've talked to her about or messaged her about, like, well, I'm not okay being a secret because it seems shameful and I've lived that way. I'm not okay with that anymore. And she just has said more than once, I just don't understand why you would feel shame. She feels the shame, so she doesn't
She
know
doesn't
why
understand that side of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard to explain to somebody, right? I think one of the most effective ways I've been able to kind of explain it to people lately is to compare it to what I think some of my friends who are gay have had to deal with:
Mm-hmm.
identity, their whole lives, not being able to be who they are, not being able to talk to their parents,
Yeah.
not being able to live your truth, right? It's not the same, but there are parallels that I feel are pretty profound,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm.
consequences that we worry about, right? That are so profound. Yeah.
it's, we're adoptees are marginalized. We're a
Right.
marginalized group. We're not recognized as one. We should be recognized as
Or
one,
not. No.
but we are one.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been very interesting, even up until just uh, Friday, when I got messages back from those cousins, or that cousin, excuse me. I keep coupling her with her sister because her sister's on there as well. But the fact that, this one grandmother, my maternal grandmother, had this child, gave him up for adoption, got married, had a daughter with another man where she was married to somebody else. And then this woman grew up thinking, like, who am I? And then she had me and gave me up for adoption.
Mm.
And no
it's
one
just
knew anything about any of it. Right? It wasn't like you did it because you knew that it was like a cycle in your family. It was just this cycle that was happening without anyone knowing. It's wild.
God,
is.
intense stuff. Well, I know you will keep us
Yeah.
posted
Please.
Yeah.
since we get to
Yeah.
happily see you once a month. And
I love it.
thank you for sharing, and
Thank
such
you,
a great
Jessica.
conversation. And
Yeah.
Listen, thank you too, because honestly, before you, I had one person in my life that I really, turned to for support. And you guys are supporting me through this little box every week. And just being able to meet you in New York and being in that room with all those adoptees was just great.
And still,
such an incredible weekend, wasn't it? Just
it
It was
really,
incredible. It really was. So what you are doing has changed my life for the better. And I just so appreciate you guys. And I'm not going to cry.
I know you're making me cry.
an interview of tears. Mm.
I
Deep
love you
breaths.
guys.
Love
Yeah.
you
We love
back.
you. We love
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
And we will
Jessica.
see you
Wow.
soon.
See you soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
Bye.
Bye.